Hello, welcome to not another DoneJS contributors meeting. This is a meeting where we're going to discuss what we're calling our open source epics that are 6 weeks, and we're going to talk about the proposals that are going to go into the next 6-week epic. And we're going to talk about also a little bit of details about how we're doing with the issues that we picked up from that we're kind of finishing in this current epic. I also want to call them epochs, so it's kind of something you'll see me
say
slow. I'm
the
not
British
sure which one to say. Yeah,
British pronunciation
epoch versus epic. I don't know, because it's like, yo, it's epic, brah, versus like that is a time frame that we're going to be working, which is our epoch. Anywho, so let's kick off with our status about how we are doing from the survey results from last time. So I've got the survey results from last time, and I'm just going to run through and talk about where we are and how things are going. So make CanJS easier to debug. This is going pretty well. We've taken the time, and I talked about this, I think, in the last contributors meeting, or maybe 2 ago, about how we are naming functions to give much better stack traces, how we've added the log method as well on most of our observables. So this is mostly done, but we want to have a guide that explains how we're doing everything and what we've done. So that's going really well. I don't know if Chasen wants to talk about the next.
Since you're already screen sharing, go for it. Or I can talk about it while you're screen sharing. So the next one is the group API docs by their purpose instead of collection. This is something that we deployed to the site yesterday. So now if you go to canjs.com and click on API docs, you'll see they're grouped by observables, data modeling, views, etc. By default, we're only showing what's in the core collection. This is what we think new users need to see most, and what kind of day-to-day what people are most working with. So we just show those, and then Justin's hovering over the plus expand button. When he clicks on that, then we show all of the packages in the other collections under that group. So he clicked on that, and now he sees infrastructure and ecosystem and the legacy packages as well. So you can kind of customize, in a sense, the sidebar to what you want to see. It'll remember what you've opened up in your browser, caches that in local storage. So when you come back to the site, it'll be just how you left it. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Jason. The queues for error-free and traceable code, this is in some ways really related to CanDebug. That's going well. I haven't a lot of the debug and this error-free the queues code is going to land in 4.0. Our goal for 4.0 is to only change, like, we should have really strong backwards compatibility. Only thing that we're really removing for 4.0 is a whole bunch of legacy cruft and stash things that, like, you've been warned not to do since 3.0 for the most part, and or old legacy binding syntaxes. We're just kind of cleaning those things, removing those things. The only really breaking change will be if you're using can event. We have a kind of a compatibility can event queues that is highly compatible with can event. But my hope is that in the next 2 weeks, next week, we'll have a 4.0 that people can start really using. We actually have, well, there is actually already a 4.0, and it's begun to be documented here in CanJS GitHub IO next. I think soon I'll have the canjs.com link to it here, so you can see it under the 3.0. So I'll probably have that done next week, and I'd really like the following week or very soon to have a 4.0 release that people can start using, migrating their apps to. Like I said, again, our goal is not to make it difficult to upgrade to 4.0. It should be far easier to upgrade to 4.0 than like 3.0 to 4.0 was. There's really only one breaking change that we're making. Allow CanObserve to make objects and arrays observable without proxy. That is now complete. In CanJS 3.0, you can see this observe, CanObserve. This works right now. It's really useful if you want to use it for ViewModels. You can use it with, you can turn your normal classes into observable objects in CanJS by just, in their constructor function, returning essentially a proxied version of the instance. So check that out if you want to start using that. We're looking to integrate this more tightly into other parts of CanJS going forward. CanStash 4.0. Kevin, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so CanStash 4.0, we put a lot of work into CanStash 3.0 to give really good warnings about all the stuff that we're going to remove in CanStash 4.0. So all those things are in now. You should see warnings with file name and the line number of things that you're using that are going to be removed in 4.0. And you should also, it should give you suggestions for what you should be using instead, all of the new features that we've added. And we're now working on Stash 4.0, so we're starting to go and start to remove all those things in 4.0. So hopefully in the next week or so, that should all be done in 4.0.
Thanks, Kevin. So the things remaining that we didn't get to is make it easier to configure and understand CanSet. That is going to be automatic, that we're going to work on this for the next epic. So in the next 6 weeks, we're going to pick that one up no matter what. And this one is not going to be on the survey. All of the other remaining ones are going to be on the next survey. Support JSX templates, use CanElement, allow properties to be defined with decorators. And there'll be some new things. DoneJS, we didn't get to any of these. We didn't pick up any of these. We've been kind of focusing on CanJS. StealJS, I know Matthew's about to finally start working on the API.
That's right, yes.
So we are going to get to that one hopefully next week. The rest of them will be present on the survey again, and a few additional things on Steel. So let's talk about the new survey, shall we?
Let's.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
if you refresh that,
oh no, oh no, do you still have it? Save your page, Matthew. let's hope it works.
We have run into this bug with GitHub losing our changes in comments so frequently. Anyone from GitHub is
watching, yeah, please fix this bug.
Your checkbox theory wasn't the problem.
Yeah,
well,
okay.
At least in this one case, it didn't cause it to break.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do is, I think we should, though, keep it to like CanJS and StealJS and then DoneJS, because I think that if we rotate, it'll be kind of weird for if someone wants to watch contiguous, like the Steel part or the DoneJS part. I think it'll be odd. But I think it's good to switch between as much as we want. So Kevin or Matthew, would either of you like to take the first CanJS one?
Yeah, I don't want to take any CanJS ones if I'm going to be talking about
then
a bunch of Steel ones.
Kevin,
Yeah, I can go and talk about JSX. Let me share this.
So for these ones, remember, we're the ones that are from previous lists. We're not going to go into much detail about these. We're not going to do 5 minutes. Try to keep it very short, and we'll just link to the old explanation.
Yeah, I'll go quick on this one since I know it's something you presented last time. But since I wasn't here, I'll talk about it a little bit. So yeah, this is an issue that Justin mentioned earlier. Was one that was on the previous survey and was so close to being something that we accepted. It actually got kind of the same amount of votes as Stash 4.0, but it's a much bigger effort, so we decided to take up Stash 4.0. But to give you a kind of high-level overview of this. JSX, a lot of people love JSX. It allows you to do some really awesome things compared to a templating engine like Stash. You can use JavaScript expressions directly, things like this. This is a normal JavaScript expression. Same thing with mapping over your objects. You can also reuse pieces of your template by putting them into functions or property or variables. That's kind of shown here. And JSX transpiles down to JavaScript function calls that kind of look like this. So you can use the regular dev tools that you already know and love, which is a huge benefit. On top of that, combining JSX and CanJS allows us to do a bunch of awesome things that make it easier to use than JSX with other frameworks. So we have our observables, so we're going to hook up JSX with our observable system so that your templates will automatically change without you having to do like a set state or should component update, things you have to do in other languages. We're going to add our event and one-way and two-way bindings on top of JSX, which is helpful. And we're also going to add support for virtual properties like isResolved and isPending, things that you already have in Stash. So this is all kind of laid out here in this full proposal. You can look at this, kind of gives you an example of what a larger component would look like using JSX. And with that, I will be done. We can move on to the next one.
Thanks, Kevin. In reality, if we were going to go by favorites, a lot of my favorites are the ones that you wrote up and did. But I'll pick of my favorites. Probably the next one. Oh, see, that's weird how it changes. Anyways, so this one's actually a pretty simple one. I don't think it's very hard, but it's something that has kind of bugged a few people for a while, and I just think now's the time to fix it, which is to make it so that tags or your actual component can be dynamic. So you could have a tag name here, which could be a string, and then if that tag name property changed on your view model, then we would essentially put a different component in that place. I also want to make it so it supports, you can actually pass component constructor functions here. I think I show that somewhere here. Something like this, where if you had a component, you could actually have tagless components that you import into your template and then can use like this. I do think I'm willing to kind of like discuss what the how do I say the syntax here. I think curly braces make sense, but it just feels so like heavy. I don't like it. I almost want to, I don't know, drop to single curly, but I probably won't do that. But you know, just to support this kind of thing where you can import your component and just put it in the page. There's some other things that I want to fix while I'm doing this. At the last DoneJS Chicago, people were confused because they had a parent component that was, and this is the new kind of auto mount ability of components, so that if the component is just inserted into the page automatically, it will mount itself on that kind of normal element that doesn't actually wasn't built by Stash. But when that happened, when this component was defined, digital clock wasn't yet defined and its behavior didn't take effect. So I want to make it so that if you put in a component, even if that component's not defined, if it ever becomes defined, the component will mount itself. So that's really a few other things that I think it solves too, real quick. A lot of our pages have, or a lot of our apps have this kind of convention to, given a route, render a particular, or load an element, load a component, and then render that component. So you have to have this kind of weird, out of CanJS ability to do that, or out of Stash ability to do that, because we can't dynamically provide a component. Well, this would fix that. And also, this would just reduce the importance of can view callbacks. Can view callbacks stateful. It's something that we're trying to eliminate. So this would help with that as well. All right. Kevin, you want to go next?
Sure. All right, so this is another issue that was talked about at the previous for the previous epic, but it's been expanded a little bit and modified a little bit, so I'll talk about it. So this is basically to combine two of our most exciting new technologies, CanElement and CanObserve, and also to use those in our guides and recipes. So CanElement, we've kind of talked about before. It allows you to create custom elements, and CanObserve, which Justin just mentioned, you can use normal JavaScript objects and arrays and make them observable. So there's some benefits of both of these things. CanElement is automatically parsed and constructed, which they call this kind of upgrading. It's kind of the same thing as Justin just mentioned with auto mount, where if you have something in your HTML page and then later you render or create this custom element, it will automatically take it from this and replace it with what's defined by your custom element, which is really nice. It gets rid of a lot of this cruft that we used to do in all of our JS bins that always confuse people. The next thing is that it's custom elements use standard DOM attributes and events, so it's really easy to interoperate with other frameworks or just with the console. You can kind of see here in this, with CanElement, you can just select the element in DevTools and modify it to ViewModel directly, which is really nice. The last thing is that they use Shadow DOM for, this means that your styles are isolated to the element. CanObserve is awesome because you can use objects and arrays, and people already understand objects and arrays and how to work with them. And they automatically are observable through getters and setters or getting and setting values. All the array methods are observable and all that. So that's awesome. So this proposal is basically to combine these into a really easy to use API. So this is kind of the one suggestion. This isn't really finalized. If this is accepted, we'll kind of iron out all the details of what this API should look like. And then the second part of this is basically to update our guides and recipes to use this instead of CanComponent and CanDefine. Cool.
Jinx.
That's it.
All right. So the next one is streamy ViewModels. So there's a few different ideas for this. In general, this issue is to find a different way of architecting, but basically moving away from our define map style of view models, which is can be highly imperative, to something more declarative, a little bit easier to understand, test and things like that. So this issue has a few thoughts and proposals submitted by Chris and Kevin, and then I submitted one in the beginning. What I'd like to do is kind of consolidate on one of these, build one, maybe build multiple. I think in some ways there's actually kind of two different styles that I think both are, I would like to explore, and basically release a package that could serve as a stand-in for define map. So if you vote for this, we're going to explore that. I'll go through mine. My hope is I will at some point talk to Chris and he can expand his a little bit more, or give him time to do that. I'll go through CanReducer, and this is when I explain this, like the APIs here are not at all finalized. This is conceptual, about as close as I could get in like 2 hours writing last night. So this one will, I don't know if Chase, you want to start a counter to let me know when I hit my 5 minutes, because this one is going to take all 5 minutes.
Sure, sounds good.
So the idea here is, let's just take a simple counter define map. And the add and subtract are both changing count. And it can be very difficult as a view model expands in complexity to know what are really the rules for count, right? To know this behavior because of this imperative code. But what I also like is that what I do like about defined maps is that it produces for consumers a very well understood API. You know, it's very easy to be like, oh, I'm going to create a counter. I can call methods on it. So really, in some ways, the larger goal for any streaming view model at this point is to kind of clean up what's going inside of a observable type, but still give it that familiar API that people can consume. Now, with streams, you wouldn't have this imperative code if you were using something like Kefir. Instead, what you might do is derive the count value from an add and subtract stream. So like every time someone adds, there might be an event object like type add increment by, and every time someone subtracts, there might be a subtract stream that has events like this, what you should decrement by and what your type is. And with streams, what you would do is kind of reduce these events into a value. In this case, the count. So I might say, hey, count, you start at 0. I'm going to merge these two streams. I'm going to, depending on what type of event happened, add or subtract. I just realized those should be quotes. I'm going to take my last state and return the new state based on the event. Now you'll notice there's no imperative code here, right? It's everything here could be immutable, and all of this would work. So the benefits of streams, yeah, they're not imperative and they are easier to test, right? I could create a create count stream function that I could just pass it some events, and it would return a new stream, right? So it takes streams and returns streams. This is kind of higher order programming, but it's still very functional. I don't have to create an instance of a counter. I have to create an instance of a counter. Instead, I just can create a count stream function and just send it a bunch of events and see what the resulting count stream would produce, right? That's great. I really like that. Now, while event streams have benefits, they also have drawbacks. If you saw the CanJS guide that I did on the credit card advanced guide and saw the JavaScript here, you would see how it kind of feels very disorganized. Like there's just kind of random functions that connect to, it feels like random other streams. There's random streams that connect to other random streams, and they eventually just kind of create all these other stream properties on this view model that we passed. That stinks, right? So that's kind of a problem that I would like to address. And there's a whole lot of boilerplate for common patterns, like this reducer, you know, it just takes a lot. And just streams themselves, I think, are weird. Like if you want to provide like a streaming external API, it's just kind of a weird thing for others to consume. So I want something that strikes what I think is a good balance. So let's talk about what that would look like.
You're at 4 minutes, Justin.
Oh boy, yeah, we might have to extend this one just because it's. I might take like 3 minutes of time from one of my other ones that I'll talk about. So can reducer here essentially. There's a count. What you do is you all methods can't actually change code. All that they can do is produce events. So add and subtract. I'm actually defining a function here that produces add events and another function that produces subtract events, and whatever. These are enumerating its arguments, and this is defining the count property. In the end, I'm going to kind of explain this more in a second, but in the end, you get to a nice counter that once it's bound to in some way, you can do the same kind of calling methods and reading the count property. Now, so let's talk about that. What add, increment by, and subtract, decrement do is they create these add and subtract functions. essentially, when you call counter add increment by, it's going to produce on kind of a event bus this event, add increment by, right? Because we're essentially naming the properties that we want to add to this event by naming our arguments. Subtract would do something similar. And then with the add method, what the add method does is it's syntactic sugar for or the count definition is, it's syntactic sugar for the reducer pattern. If there was an add event, you can update your last state. You return your last state plus whatever the event was, increment by. Same with subtract. You can also define setters. There's a shorthand for that. So read more about it in detail. You know, this is just syntactic sugar for the same kind of reducer that we were doing previously. The nice thing I like about this is that it produces static methods that you can use to set up tests. So it creates a static add method that returns a function that will emit add events to this stream. So if I call, it kind of shows it right up here, and I'm piping one stream into the next, and then we get that output stream. So I get this add and subtract methods, and on the final resulting stream, if I called add 3, subtract 3, it would just give me this final stream is essentially going to emit the events that would be normally emitted by add and subtract. So this makes testing statically rather easy. I can test just the behavior of count by kind of piping the streams in this kind of stream that combines both the add and subtract streams into count, and then I can see what that final stream would produce by calling add and subtract. So it would produce an add event, then a count, because count would have been derived, then the subtract event, and then a new count, right? And I could it shows how you could test that. I'm going to assume that this is going to work with streams. The observable spec would be the default streams. I want to make it use other streams. There's a whole bunch of other examples that I made, especially this one, which has some kind of expanded syntax that I kind of figured I wanted to do, such as like being able to say, hey, I want to call Kefir combine with pay clicked card, and then here's kind of its reducer function. So check this out if you want something that essentially uses streams as, or vote for this if you want us to experiment with different ways of creating view models. And this one in particular, if you like this one, give this one a thumbs up if you like if you like streams. All right, Kevin.
Cool. All right, the next one I'm going to talk about is a proposal for CanDefine to expand the types that are available and also add required properties. So these are a few different things that are kind of related that people have asked for around types in CanDefine. So the first thing is we want to allow a shorthand using the built-in constructors, so like string and number as constructors. Currently, you'd have to do this with like string and quotes, and so we want to add support for this kind of thing. The next part is people have asked for more types. So this is just a list of a few types that people have asked for, and then some other ones that exist in other languages and ideas that I had. So things like float and integer, people have asked for. Character, it would be nice to have like an enum type or a union type that some other languages like Elm have, and tuple also. The next part is stricter types. So these are basically types that instead of doing coercion when the property is set, they would actually throw errors if you are setting it to a value of a different type. So in this case, if you set prop to a number, then this strict string would throw an error saying that, you know, it's supposed to be a string. This might be called must string or something else. And then the last piece of this is required value. So people have asked for this a bunch of different times. There's several issues where people have asked for allowing required properties in CanDefine. So basically, when you construct a new instance of a define map, if you're not setting that property, then an error would be thrown saying that, you know, this property is required. So I think that's it. I went through that really fast, but that's what this proposal is.
Good job. All right, so my next one is a forms guide. Essentially, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is really hard to know about in CanJS. CanJS actually has a ton of ability to, like, there's a huge variety of ways that you could work with forms. You could create custom events, custom attributes. There's a whole lot of things there, but it's all kind of scattershot if you're going to find it through the documentation. So I wanted to propose a guide that shows how to connect a view model to like all commonly implemented in browser form types, like your date helper, your input type, date, time, and things like that. How to use converters to make that easier. Even using custom attributes to simplify difficult to read form values. Like we have this values special property on select multiple that's super handy, but I don't think many people know about it. So I want to expose that and conceptually show how you could build your own custom attributes. And then I want to talk about just all the different ways of setting up the relationship between the value in the input or the form control and the value in the view model. So these are all of the different ways of kind of setting up your bindings. And then how to perform validations, how to like do a and this is more model related things here, how to just like have a form that creates model data, and then how to update how to have a form that updates data, especially around kind of the backup restore clonable idea, where you want to be able to kind of reset your properties, kind of try out new values. How do you do that? So vote for this if you want a comprehensive guide for working with forms in CanJS. Chasen, you want to go next?
Sure. All right, so this issue, add links to additional resources in each package's docs. This one is pretty straightforward. So the TLDR is that on each of our documentation pages, at the bottom of each page, we should add like a See Also section that links to related docs and blog posts and guides and videos and any other kind of helpful materials. The problem is that we have a lot of documentation in a bunch of different places. In our guides, we have really good examples of like how to use certain APIs. We have our CanJS YouTube channel, and we put videos on there that are not just going through the guides, but also talking about some specific APIs too. But when you're actually viewing the docs for, say, can component events, we have the like high-level overview of how to use things and some notes. But it would be really helpful if there was like a See Also section or additional resources section at the bottom of the page that linked to other related docs. So that would be things like can-utils, DOM events for inserted and removed and what have you. Any guides where we're using the events object and kind of more sample code for people to be able to look at. Any other articles that have been written that use an API, videos, etc. So potential solution, I just talked about like having a See Also section at the bottom. We can do this a couple of ways. One is that we can generate, because we built the site, we can generate a list of everything that links to any particular API. So anything that links to the like events docs could be listed here. Another idea is to manually curate what we put into that See Also. So that would allow us to kind of manually put, okay, here are the blog posts on, the Patobi blog, on other sites that use or reference an API. I feel like there's like this is a problem that we need to solve, and how we will solve it, I'm a little unclear on. In the issue, I came up with this mock-up of like, oh, if we have a see also section, then maybe we'll list the related docs that are elsewhere on the site, and then have the manually curated list of like other blog posts and videos and that sort of thing. For this one, I want to have us work with a designer to kind of figure out what the user experience should be, and how best to refer to additional resources. I think that's it. I think that's a okay summary.
Thanks, Jason.
Yep.
I'll do the routing guide. So routing is really difficult in CanJS because there's so much variance on how people set up routing, that we need a good guide for it. So this, I've started collecting all of the different problems people are facing, and I would say vote for this one if you want a guide around or at least all of these problems being addressed in CanRoute. And my guess is this is going to actually result in some additional features and work on CanRoute, some API cleanup and things like that. So if you want us to pay particular attention and to CanRoute, to, if not make things easier, to document how to do certain things, vote for this. Also, please make sure you let me know if there's other things that, and other problems that you have. Add those here. And if there's particular of these that you would find really helpful, it's totally okay to kind of like plus one those in a comment, because there's already so many things that we're going to need to kind of pick and choose which ones are the most important to address. So if you want routing worked on, vote for this. And then finally, a lot of properties be defined with decorators. This was already proposed. Got a few votes. Vote for it again if you want to be able to use a decorator to decorate a standard class type with the behaviors of CanDefine. All right. Should we move on to Steal?
Let's do it. Everyone gets to hear me talk for a while. Okay. So Steal has mostly the same issues. Can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yep.
So yes?
Yes.
Still mostly has the same issues. I'm going to go over the ones that have been previously presented. The only issue that we took on this time was reformatting the documentation by topic. That's still being worked on. Hope to have an initial release next week. So the ones that were part of the previous survey and are still on them are these four. One of them is minimizing bundle size with tree shaking. Tree shaking is a way to kind of do dead code elimination by determining what functions and not just functions, but anything that you import, what you're actually using in your application. And so that way it knows that in this example, we're importing flatten, we're not using intersection. We know that we can remove intersection from the code. So it's a way of reducing code size by using kind of the semantics of ES modules to know what is and is not used. So it's tree shaking. Removing automatic main loading. This issue goes through some of the pitfalls that people have with using Steal, and kind of the initial way you use it is you don't specify a main. but then sometimes you do, and how that can be slightly confusing. So this would be a 2.0 issue. I don't know if we're quite ready for 2.0 yet, but you can still vote for it if you want to kind of normalize how Steal is used, so you always have to provide a main in your script tag. Next is support for babel-preset-env. Babel-preset-env is it's a preset, I guess, a type of plugin for Babel. What it does is you tell it kind of, instead of saying what features you want to use, you say what you want to support. So you say, for example, I want to support the last 2 versions of Safari and the newest version of Chrome and Firefox. And based off that information, it will know which plugins you need to use. But in order for this to work, it has to do some dynamic requiring, which you cannot do in Steal in the client. So what this issue proposes is a way to kind of have a backdoor to allow certain special modules like this one to be able to do dynamic importing. So that is making having Steal support babel-preset-env. Lastly, one we went over last time is allowing the ability to transpile module formats other than ES modules. So currently, a lot of people do use CanJS, but if you use like classes or something like that in your CanJS, it doesn't get transpiled to the ES5. So like if you wanted to do that, you would have to kind of manually do that transpilation yourself after the build completes or something like that. So a lot of people have asked for this, but I think also more people are moving towards using ES modules. So I don't know what the popularity of this is, but hey, you can vote for it if you're using CanJS and you do want Steal to support transpiling those. All right, so there are a couple of new ones, and these are going to be pretty quick to go over. It's just pushing out Slim support for can import. Manuel tackled this issue. He wrote down all the things that are causing can import not to work. Can import, of course, is a way to import modules within your Stash templates. And he's kind of went through and listed all of the problems that we currently have and some ideas of how to fix those. So it's really well detailed. He's done the research to know what's actually needed to do. We just need to clear some time for him and possibly myself to work on it a few days to kind of fix all the remaining issues, and then we'll have that cleared out. And the only thing that will be remaining first, as far as the optimized build, will be support in DoneSSR, which I'll be doing that myself eventually, anyways. So that is finishing off Slim and optimized build support with the can import tag. Next is an improved plugin extension writing guide. So we have a guide that actually Ilya created, which is here. It goes through the steps of writing a Steal plugin. I believe this one is like creating preloading images, and it goes through, talks about it, but this is a little bit dated. We want to improve this because what we find is a lot of people are like, hey, is there a plugin for Vue, or is there a plugin for SAS or stuff like this? And we don't have time to create a plugin. I guess I didn't save this correctly because it gets cut off. I'll have to update this. But anyways, we don't have time to create a plugin for every different format that exists. So we want to empower Steal users to create plugins themselves. It's actually not very difficult. So yeah, we want to kind of expand on this documentation that already exists, go in more detail about kind of what the life cycle hooks are, you want to use for different types of plugins. Definitely focus on the translate hook, because that's the one that you most often use for stuff like, if you want to write a SAS plugin or a Vue plugin. And just explain all the different parts of it, the debugging syntax and how that interplays with plugins, ext config, plugins configuration, which is what people have to use to actually use your plugin. And then lastly, there's we want to possibly explore how we can make it easier for plugin authors to test their plugins. A while back, I created this module called Steal Test Helpers. And what Steal Test Helpers, excuse me, it's a module that makes it easy to like test. It was really made for the NPM plugin. I wanted a way to be able to like test different NPM features without like creating a new project for each one. So you can kind of like just within memory here, you can create a fake package JSON and provide definitions for modules, provide their source. And that way you can actually test that, hey, this particular process.cwd, which is a feature of Node.js, that we actually support this through the NPM plugin. I can test it here and make sure it works. So currently, like I said, this was made specifically to solve that problem. Most of the NPM tests are written this way now, and we have a lot of them. So it's proven to be useful there. So what I'm proposing here is to you know, there's not a README or anything like that to actually document this thing to make sure it works well, and like kind of other common scenarios, like, you know, like I said, if you want to write a Vue plugin or something like this, make sure it's useful for those people as well. So it's improved plugin guide, improving that. Lastly, on the Steel side is revisiting the continuous build. The continuous build, aka watch mode, is a feature of Steel tools. Go to the guide here. We actually have a guide for this in Steel tools 0.9. We're currently at, I think, 1.9. Double check that real quick. We're way past when this was initially created. The continuous, yeah, we're at 1.9. Continuous build was created before the NPM plugin even existed, so it predates a lot of things. And the guide is very old. It goes through like using this with a CAN 2.3 project, maybe even before CAN 2.3. So yeah, this guide probably doesn't even work anymore today. So I want to update the guide. Just also want to revisit like stuff like the performance of it, make sure that that's good. You know, when I've talked with people who have tried to use this, they've had problems with the watch mode, how it works internally. It's very stateful. It has to remember certain things to try to be fast. And I've heard people that had problems with it, with maybe not working sometimes with certain configuration and stuff like that. So just want to make sure it works. Probably go use some of our DoneJS guides, like Place My Order. Make sure it works there. Some stuff that uses more configuration and stuff like that. Make sure it's fast. In doing that, a lot of the internals of the watch mode and live reload are very similar. They reuse some of the same modules, and that's because they're kind of doing a similar sort of thing. So, you know, if improvement on one side often leads to improvement on the other. So revisiting the continuous build is something that we're thinking possibly about doing. Well, let me just back up a second. The kind of our strategy for Steel in development, having a fast as possible development process. We have live reload, which is a way to run a server that will automatically reload your code in the browser. Then we have development bundles, and development bundles are a way to take your node modules and pre-bundle those, because those are not things that change very often. That way you're not loading as much code in the client. And then continuous build is another thing where it's a way to, like, basically you're always running in production mode, which means, you know, production mode is usually very fast to like reload the browser and stuff like that. So if we can make this really, really fast and really good, then it kind of solves that one problem that Steel has in development, where, you know, a lot of kind of the basic usage of it can be kind of slow in large applications. All right, so that is all of the Steel issues. And now I will go on to the DoneJS issues.
If you want, I can do the scaffolding one. So
okay,
quick break.
Okay.
All right. So the idea here is to make it possible to quickly prototype applications and to quickly make demo pages that can adjust the values of a view model. So this is in DoneJS because I think it will be integrated into like DoneJS add app and generators and things like that. Even though the actual components will probably, I propose just naming them CanJS, because all they'll really depend on is CanJS. the idea is we're going to create some 5 components: can create, can edit, can list, can view, and you pass some data. I can actually let me just show like a. Let me just start with the use case for one of them, can edit. The idea is, let's say you had a little component, and it had a due date, an age, and a name on the view model, and you were presenting it somehow. That doesn't really matter. The idea is, if you put your component in the page, you could export the view model to a variable, and then you could use can edit to essentially create a UI that allows you to manipulate all of the essentially stateful serializable properties on that view model. So you could think of, if you use can edit, it might produce a control, a form that allows you to see the value of the view model and then to edit it and then to apply those changes if you as you've been editing each control. So that would make making demo pages a lot easier. But it goes past that and brings in one thing that I really, really like and miss from my Ruby on Rails days, which is just being able to scaffold. You have a data type like a model, and you just want to produce all of that CRUD behavior. So idea is, if you had a to-do and it was connected through can connect, you could just pass that to-do type to can CRUD, and what it would do is generate an ability to create to-dos, list all to-dos, select a to-do to be edited, update that to-do, and then also delete that to-do, right? So the idea is, it would, can CRUD would actually call like can list, can create, can edit, and coordinate between all of those. And then I even like the ability that can CRUD, we could pass it slots to say, well, don't use your default, can create functionality. Instead, use my to-do create for the create part of what can CRUD would normally do. So slots, you could kind of swap out your own parts. And what I really like about this is you can start, a lot of times if we start on client work and we've got the service layer, well, let's just get the service layer working. We can put can CRUD in place on a few different pages and just start playing with the service layer and the data layer. And then as we fill out other parts of CanJS, we could either use just kind of these, generic list, create, edit, generate like kind of components, and then slowly swap them out until we have our full working application. So that is quick prototyping scaffolding for observables.
Awesome. All right, so let me share again. Again, like I did with Steel, I'm going to go through so for DoneJS, we didn't pick any of the CanJS. So all the same all the same survey questions will be on there from last time. So I'm just going to go over those real quick. One of them is adding ecosystem generator plugins page. So the same way that CanJS lists ecosystem packages, we'd like to do something similar for DoneJS. We really haven't quite figured out how that would look necessarily, but we want to somehow have a list of a way for like users to submit their projects to be part of the DoneJS ecosystem, kind of figuring out how that works. Like maybe you would have a separate repository where you can just send a pull request, and if we accept that pull request, then automatically somehow you appear on DoneJS.com. So this is something people have definitely expressed interest in. So if you like this, vote for it. The next one is baseline PWA support. PWA is an acronym for Progressive Web App, I believe. And to be considered a PWA, you have to have a service worker. You have to have like a manifest file. There's a few different things that you have to do. So yeah, what we were talking about for baseline support would be having a generator called DoneJS PWA. And just by installing that, it's going to create the service worker and all the different files that you need for your PWA. We're thinking about having more advanced functionality for PWAs in the future, but this is the baseline support just by installing the generator. Next is a better console for development. Prototyped this a while back. The problem is that your development console can be kind of a mess at times. You get lots of warnings. You get lots of information that come from a variety of places. Some of it's like related to live reload. Some of it's related to just, like console.logs and stuff that happen within your application. The solution is to come up with a design for a more segmented console. So this is one prototype it did. Another idea could be to have some type of web UI that shows you console messages. The baseline support is to have a way to like specify different interfaces yourself, so that potentially you could, if you prefer more of a cursive style, you could use that, or you could use a web UI. And deciding on which one we want to actually do would be part of this as well. We'd probably just do one to start. So it's an improved console for DoneServe. Lastly is adding docs for customizing the generator templates. So kind of an unknown feature of DoneJS is that your generators can be customized by editing the .donejs/templates folder. All of the templates can go there, and you can do stuff a different way. DoneJS Mocha does this. It creates a .donejs templates folder, and this way it ensures that when you add a new module or something, your tests are Mocha tests. So this is not documented in any way, in any way that I'm aware of, at least. So our solution is having a DoneJS customize command that will create the folder for you and populate it with all the default templates, and then just documenting on how you can edit these and what you should be doing, some type of guide. So those are all the previous DoneJS issues. Pretty excited about the new ones. We have some good ones, like Justin went over the scaffolding. I really like that one. Probably first one to talk about is improving live reload performance. Live reload performance has been traditionally a really good part of DoneJS. When I first started working on this, I knew that we were getting updates in like under 200 milliseconds. And when I looked at it this summer, I was seeing in some cases, like for doc component files, that there had been a little bit of a regression in how fast the live reload occurs. To solve this, solution first is obviously finding any performance regressions and fixing those. And then second is setting up some type of way to do benchmarking. We want to, if you make something fast, you have some benchmarks, you can prevent regressions. So figuring out how to do benchmarking is part of this proposal. That is improving live reload performance. And like I said, if you're interested in either this or the continuous builds, it's likely that there's some common stuff happening there that will improve the other, depending on which one we do. Next is an SSR tips and tricks guide. So server-side rendering is one of the best parts of DoneJS. It's really awesome. And it's really awesome because it basically takes the problem out of your hands. You don't have to think about server rendering. You just write your application as a client-side JavaScript single-page application, and we kind of emulate the environment for you so that your code runs the same on the server as it does on the client. And then we use the magic of zones to kind of know when everything is done. But the problem that this presents is that sometimes you do want to do stuff slightly differently on the server, or the environment is different enough that you do need to do some different stuff. So there's not a lot of information out there on how you can do this. We see people who are like, hey, I have this chunk of HTML and I don't want it to render on the server. How do I prevent that? How do you adjust how do you sometimes you run into problems where the SSR doesn't actually finish. It just kind of hangs forever. And there's actually tools to help with this. There's a way to set a timeout. There's a way to enable debug information. It will actually, after it times out, it will launch it will show in the browser, and you'll actually get a bunch of stack traces that you can look at. But we don't have a guide on how to use this. Sometimes you want to have like some functionality that you don't want to wait on the zone because maybe it's doing something that the zone can never know about. And there's ways to do that. There's a zone.ignore that, like I said, a lot of people just don't know about. So the proposal here is to write kind of a tips and tricks guide. This will just kind of be organized by, just kind of between like zone kind of things and, kind of more use case driven. Like there's this code that I don't want to show, or this is code that I want to wait until the user scrolls down the show. So therefore I don't want that to be server rendered. So all different types of tips and tricks that you might want to do for server rendering. Oh yeah, there's also a status code. I don't know if many people know this, but if your application view model has a status code property, we'll use that as a status. So this is a way to to do 404s. Like say that your application view model has a page property, and if the page is not equal to, you only have like 3 or 4 pages. If it's not any of those pages, well, that should result in a 404. You can actually do that in your view model, but just haven't documented it real well on that ability. So I really like this one. Hope people vote for that. And is that all of them? Oh, lastly, is improving the debugging experience for zones. Now, this is more centered around using done auto render in the client. If you're using zones with server rendering, we already have timeouts and we already have the debug mode. You just have to pass the flag. I mean, obviously, we need to document that a little bit better so people know about it. And it's not to say that you don't experience issues with zones in server rendering, but this is more focused on kind of when people are using done auto render in the client. So a lot of times what happens, and this is kind of the blessing and the curse of zones, is that because it kind of automatically knows about your code, it knows what your code's doing. It doesn't have to, you don't have to do anything special to configure it. But what that also means is that when something doesn't work for some reason, you're kind of left in the dark and you don't know why your application doesn't finish loading. So there's a couple things we want to do. First is creating a break on timeout. So there is a CanZone/debug. This is a zone plugin. And what it does now is whenever your application times out, so for example, in this code example, we're setting a 5-second timeout. Whenever that timeout occurs, the debug zone will log it. What it does is every time you run an asynchronous task, like a set timeout or run a promise, it creates a stack trace for where that code occurred. And then when the timeout occurs, it shows that have happened, all the stack traces that never completed. So yeah, what the addition that we're looking to do is adding a second argument here, an options argument, and we'll just have for now one option, which is break. So what this will do is instead of like timing out and logging, like it just logs all that stuff to the console, it will actually break on the next time something occurred. So for example, let's say that you have, and this is the most common reason why a zone won't complete, is you're doing some type of like recursive set timeout, to where like you're doing a set timeout, you run some code, and then you call the same function again with a new set timeout. You just do that over and over again. Well, the zone will never complete because it's waiting for those set timeouts to stop happening, but they're never going to stop happening. So what this would do is it actually set a debugger statement, and the next time that set timeout's called, you'd have a handle on that. You could step into the code and kind of see, oh yeah, this is a recursive set timeout. I need to wrap this in the zone.ignore to prevent it from actually from running within the zone. So that's that. The kind of the second part of this is adding support for the timeout and debug zones within done auto render. Done auto render is really made with server rendering in mind, and because of that, it doesn't have timeouts because it assumes that if it worked on the server, it didn't time out on the server, then it's not going to time out the client. If it did time out the server, well, you have the debug flag there, and it will show you like what happened. So it's not really made with usage of done auto render outside of server rendering in mind, but some people do use it this way because they like the fact that they can define their entire HTML, their entire document in a single stash file. So what we do is add the timeout and debug zones there, maybe in development only. I'm not sure that if you want to do that just to save production sizes. The timeout zone's not very big, so maybe it doesn't matter. The second would have some type of option that you can enable if you want to use the break option. Probably leave it as a default to just console log all the stack traces, but if you wanted this break, maybe we'd have an option within the Steel script tag or something like that to do that. So, okay, and yeah, vote on this one if you'd like to see us focus more on improving the debugging experiences of using zones. And those are all the issues for DoneJS, I think. Yes.
Awesome, thank you, Matthew. So yeah, that's it. I don't know when the survey is going to go out, Chasen.
Yeah, I'm going to put it together right after this, and then it'll be out within, I don't know, hopefully a couple hours.
Awesome. And then by the way, if your favorite one of these proposals didn't get selected, that doesn't mean you can't work on it and do an open source contribution back to DoneJS. We are always here willing to work with people. We set up calendar invites. We'll pair with anybody to kind of get them started, get them going, give them as much advice they need. And then also, you can let us know 6 weeks from now, we're going to do another one of these. Please put any proposals that you would like to see up. Totally, find and propose them, and we'll include them as part of the survey. It doesn't have to come from us. Just helps. We would just hope that they're kind of well written, explain as much as possible. Even after this goes out, we're probably still going to spend some time cleaning up our proposals. So until next time, thanks everybody for submitting and voting. It really helps us know what we're going to be working on. And I'm going to end this Hangout.